Hello again, this is Chat UTD. Going to look back at the Sociedad game, ahead to the Arsenal game, and in between times talk about Mainoo, Garnacho and the protest that is scheduled for this weekend. Looking back to the Sociedad game, must confess I didn't see it because it coincided with my son's training and I coach his team, so I didn't watch it. Listened to bits on the radio, saw the highlights, have kind of like picked up on the themes from watching other match reactions and reading reports and whatnot, so I can't give you an informed analysis of the game, but what I can say is I'd have taken a draw before the game. I don't think it's a bad result. I said it was a 50-50 game, tough place to go, but reading between the lines, we probably had a chance to capitalise at 1-0, weren't able to, and then obviously they equalised and we're hanging on a little bit. It looked quite a contentious penalty to me, but I'm biased. Got a great chance in the second leg. You know, we're at Old Trafford under the floodlights, second leg of a European game. We'd love it to be Barcelona in the Champions League. It's not. This is where we're at, and the fans need something to get behind. So the second leg of a game in a tournament that we must try and persevere and win, and the only thing really we've got left of any interest in the season, and we got a draw away from home, so it's an interesting one next week. Excuse me. Can we get there with enough players fit? Because the squad looks wafer thin at the moment, and towards the end of games, players are looking absolutely knackered. And we've got a game at the weekend, and it's not a game where I think the manager can just play the kids. I don't think he can do that. So it's going to be much more of the same team, really. If I had my choice, I'd just rest everybody at the weekend, but we haven't got the option to do that. So that's my concern with the Sociedad game. But one of the issues we've got, whether it's Sociedad, Arsenal, whoever we're playing, is that so few of our attackers are scoring goals. Like Højlund didn't score yesterday. That's 19 games now without a goal. That's half a league season, if you look at it that way. Garnacho hasn't scored for months. Ahmad's injured. Fernandez always pitches in with goals, and Xerxes recently has started to pitch in, not prolifically, but he's scored a couple, which is decent. And he scored yesterday and played well yesterday, and seems to be unlocked in that position behind Højlund. But in the absence of having Xerxes as an alternative striker, which doesn't work anyway, we are effectively left with one senior striker at the club who hasn't scored for 19 games. And if you look throughout the team, we're really struggling for goals. So that's a big issue, whoever we're playing. Reports earlier in the week resurfaced about Mainoo and where we're up to with his contract renewal or extension or whatever. And the figure being banded about now that he wants is 180 grand a week. A couple of months ago they were saying 200 grand a week. I would give him a contract about 90 grand a week because I think that reflects the improvement that he's made and the stage of the career he's at. If you look at the amount of football he's actually played, although he's been with the squad for a little bit more than 18 months now, he's actually played about 9 or 10 months of football because he's had a few injuries. He obviously got pre-season in there as well. He hasn't played enough football and he hasn't been consistent enough to justify 200 grand a week or anything close to it. So these are press reports that could be absolute bullshit. But if they're true, I would err on the side of if he wants 180 grand a week and he isn't prepared to come down to at the most I'd pay him is 100, then I'd let him go. Because I think you're probably likely to get 60 or more, 60 million. I think. I might be wrong. I think we'd get around that. And you could argue that for his age, and he's completely unproven, you could end up getting 2 players for that. And we need players. And he's not done enough so far to say he's going to be the next Brian Robson, or he's going to be, some United fans going way ahead of themselves on Mainoo. Like I said about Garnacho, that we don't know. He could be a top-level player, he could be a middle-of-the-road player, he could just fade away. All 3 of those options are possible for Mainoo. So whilst he's a very promising talent, he isn't the 200 grand a week talent. Certainly not for the amount of time he's been with the first team squad. So My issue with them selling Mainoo and Garnacho in the January transfer window was because it was a fire sale. If they'd have done it, it'd have been a fire sale because they're desperate for money and they know that they can fetch money for those two players, but they're academy products who we need to see a bit more of. But if someone's asking for that amount of money, I'd be completely behind the club and say, just get rid. And I'm going to talk about Garnacho now because I think it's probably quite linked. About a year and a bit ago, my view on Garnacho was he's got the highest ceiling at the club. He's potentially a world class talent. He's one of our best players, and the only way I can see him leaving is when Real Madrid inevitably come calling in 3 or 4 years' time and he didn't want to be at United anymore. There's not a chance I'd have thought a year down the line that there was talk of selling him that I'd have even entertained the idea. But I'm always open to being wrong. I'm going to just look at, am I wrong or am I not? So the reason I think I might be wrong is there's more and more moments with him, with his body language, with just things that he does, his behaviour, which suggest he could, not definitely, but he could potentially have a bit of an attitude problem. He could be a bit of a bad one. I'm not sure, but he could be. He hasn't scored a goal for months. He's having a very inconsistent season. And I look at him sometimes and think he's a good dribbler, but he's very predictable. He's very one-dimensional. He does beat players at times, but he shoots from positions he shouldn't shoot in. He doesn't pick a pass. He's quite selfish at times. And I think he's quite ineffective and limited at times. And he's having quite a poor season. The flip side of that is the reason I think maybe my initial thoughts about him a year or so ago will be proved right is he's a really young lad, and young lads have inconsistencies. Young lads sometimes are a little bit petulant with their attitude, and he's had, for me, 2 really good seasons, and then he's hit a bit of a wall. But that happens at his age. I don't necessarily think the change of manager has suited him. I think he probably suited playing for Ten Hag more than he does for Amrim. I don't think this system suits him, which could be a reason to let him go, to be fair, but I think it's also a mitigating factor. And if he was at a club, I hate to say this, but if he was at a club like Liverpool, where you've got quite a lot of good role models around, they're a successful team, they've got good characters, senior players who could get around him, you could take him out of the firing line and you could put him back in as and when he was ready, and you just put it down as a bad season. Everyone looks after him and he comes back even stronger the next season. At United, we haven't got those characters to do that, and we're relying on him to be one of our best players, and he's not quite ready for that yet. So I'm open to the fact that my initial thoughts on him, which were very positive, could be right or wrong. But I must say what shifted in me is a year or so ago, there's no way I'd have entertained the idea of selling him, whereas now I can see both sides of the coin. I repeat though, if it's a fire sale, I'm completely against it. If it's a thought out strategic move, okay, I can kind of get it. I did mention the protest in my other video, but it's the most important part of the weekend for me, this weekend, football-wise. I'm pretty sure it'll be very well attended because we haven't had anything like that for quite some time, and I think everyone's pissed off. So I repeat though, it's loud complaint. At this stage, it's loud complaint. There's a lot of people complaining loudly, but it's not a protest. And you might be thinking, why are you getting so pedantic over whether it's a protest or not? The reason being, loud complaint doesn't change anything. Strategic protest for change, where you have a very clear objective and you're absolutely relentless in pursuit of that objective and you're very strategic about it, means you ultimately hopefully achieve that, and that means for us getting rid of the Glazers. Loud complaint won't do anything, because if you look at the actual nuts and bolts of it, it's people meeting in the Tollgate pub, having a few beers, walking down Talbot Road, I think it is, then turning, going towards the ground, getting towards the ground, going to the Munich tunnel, letting off flares, singing songs to voice our displeasure at what's going on, which the people who are responsible for it won't even hear that and won't be bothered about it. All of that's away from the ground, really. Even when we get near the ground, it's not in the ground. And then we go in the ground and get behind the team. It's a worthy cause. It's got to start somewhere, but that isn't going to bring about change. It's a vehicle to vent, but it's not going to bring about change. It needs more than that. But you need a starting point, and it's a starting point. But then it needs to go from there, and it needs to grow legs. And I maintain it needs a focal point. It needs someone who's inspiring. I think he's called Steve. So I can't remember his name. From the 58, has been on the different fan channels this week. He's not going to galvanise tens of thousands of people. He's not. I'm sorry. They need someone to get on this. Maybe they've tried to get someone with more charisma or whatever, but he ain't the guy. Just finally, the Arsenal game itself, it's bordering on irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. The only fear I've got is that we're going to get absolutely smashed, because I think with our best team out, I'd be a bit worried about Arsenal smashing us, especially at Old Trafford. But we've got such limited options at the moment, and as I said before, I'd rest the whole team if it was possible. I don't think he can even really rotate it, and when he does rotate it, you've, no disrespect, but you've got the likes of Eriksen, Lindelof and people like that coming in. We've barely got any senior players on the bench at the moment, so Arsenal could have a field day. That said, when I feel like that, more often than not, we actually pull something out of the bag and do all right when it looks like we're going to get a good hiding off someone. Interesting to see what he does up front. He's kind of got to play Højlund. But as I mentioned before, we've got one senior striker at the club. I say senior, he's still very young. But you can't be starting Chido Obi at the weekend. He's 17 years old and looks very raw. He's not really ready. So some managers would just throw him in. I don't think Amorim will, and I kind of agree with him. I just think he'll probably start coming off the bench earlier and earlier and earlier, because it's at the point with Højlund now where you just know he's not going to score. It's not like he could surprise us. He's a body to play up front, but that's all he is, and he's not really doing a lot in that role either. So it could be a painful experience. Hopefully not, but it very much could be. So the big thing I'm interested in is the protest, if it actually is a protest. And as I say, good on them for making a start. I just hope that it proves to be more sustainable with what they do moving forward after that, because it needs to be, because we need these people gone. We really do. The Glazers need to leave, and it don't matter what game we've just played or what game we've got coming up. That's always more important than anything else. Glazers out.